How's it going everyone? Welcome back to AZ Trading. Hope you're all doing well. And in this video on the 24th of October on the Dow Jones, I'll be showing you guys a slightly more intermediate to advanced trading technique that I use to capture this impulsive 250 point movement where I managed to take a couple partials along the way but got stopped out at break even in the end. So even though this wasn't a perfect trade, we were still able to pay ourselves along the way. I doubt you guys even want me to turn on my executions at this point, since you already know basically all my videos and the concepts that I teach are in fact put into practice and not just a hindsight backtesting review. However, stick around to the end of the video and I'll be showing you guys a very clean backtesting example where I use the same advanced technique that I'll talk about in this trade, which would have allowed you to capture not this bullish move on the Dow, but actually this much larger bullish move on the Nasdaq. So stick around guys and I'll tell you my entire thoughts and analysis prior to this trade and the exact strategy that we used in basically all of our trades. So the main trading technique that we'll be focusing on in this video is relative strength. And I'll be showing you guys the benefits of using relative strength and what happens if you don't use it. So what I mean by relative strength analysis is if you're an indice trader, so you like to trade the US indices like Nasdaq, SMT, and the Dow, all relative strength means is, let's say you found a buy opportunity on the Dow, and because we know Dow, S&P, and Nasdaq move very similarly, have you ever thought to yourself, which one should I long? Should I long the Dow because I saw the setup, or should I long the S&P or the Nasdaq? This might have crossed your mind, but in this video I'll be showcasing the importance of it and why this can actually be a very beneficial step to take advantage of all your trade ideas. Oh geez, it's thundering over here. I'll just go through my trade example first, and then throughout the trade I'll talk about relative strength. So I'm just on the Nasdaq chart, we're on a 15-minute time frame, and the pattern that we use to trade is called the RMR Pattern, where first we look for a raid. So we can see some relative equal lows over here. As soon as price reaches through that area, this is what we can call the raid. And then after the raid, we look for a market structure shift. So we had a bearish raid. As soon as swing highs start to be broken, so we have a swing high broken here, swing high broken over here. So this is what we can call the market structure shift. And finally, we look for the return area. And typically during the market structure shift, there'll be a gap that's been presented. So over here, we have a 15-minute gap. And so the entire purpose of this return area is to prevent us from FOMOing and to prevent us from buying at a very expensive price, and tells us to wait and be patient for a much cheaper price. And so when price retraces back into that return area, that's where we can place our long orders. Okay, so now that we've got our RMR setup outlined, we know that as soon as price retraces into that area, that's when we'll be looking to place an entry. But that doesn't mean we're going to be placing an entry on the Nasdaq, because at this exact moment in time, or a few minutes prior, this is the exact moment where we want to apply our relative strength analysis to find out which of the three indices are the strongest, and whichever one is the strongest, that's the one that we're going to long. So the way I did relative strength analysis in this case is I saw how deep this leg was being retraced, and I compared this leg with this previous swing low over here. And on the Nasdaq, we can see that price retraced quite deeply, making a much lower low. We're now on the S&P, and you can see that price made a slightly lower low. And finally, we're on the Dow, and we can see that price actually made a higher low. So this would be a telltale sign that the Nasdaq is actually the weakest of the three. And if we see a long position that's forming on the Nasdaq, we should actually take it on the Dow. Did that make sense how I did the relative strength analysis? So we just take a few swings prior. We have this much lower low, S&P slightly lower low, and on the Dow, a slightly higher low. So obviously the Dow is the strongest, S&P is in the middle, Nasdaq is the weakest. Yep, I think you guys understand what I'm saying. I'll just give you another quick example on how to use relative strength. So if I draw a Fibonacci from the bottom of this swing over here to the top of that swing, we can see that during that entry moment, price has retraced to 79%, around 79%. Which means it's quite a deep retracement. On the S&P, if I draw that same Fibonacci, we can see that that swing low at the time of the return entry is above the 50% level, which is much higher than the Nasdaq retracement, so the S&P is much stronger. And finally on the Dow, if I draw that same fib, you can see that that entry is also above that 50% level. So just using the fib, we can see that Nasdaq is undoubtedly the weakest and S&P and Dow are strongest. Alright, so now that we've done our relative strength analysis and we've determined the Dow is the strongest, at that exact point in time at 9:32, instead of placing our long on the NASDAQ, which is the weakest, you can see on the Dow Jones exactly at 9:32 right there, that's where I placed my long entry. So I've placed my long order there, I've put my stop loss at a previous swing low, and now we can look for objectives above. So for objectives, I like to take it off at logical areas, meaning areas with liquidity and areas with gaps. So this first partial is quite intuitive. It's at this swing high. So once this area was broken, I took off my first partial. And for my second partial, you might be wondering why I took it off there. Was it at this swing high? This would have been a good idea, but no, it wasn't here. And if we look to our left, there's nothing on the left that shows why I took off my partial there. So the real reasoning behind this is actually on the NASDAQ. And we can see on the NASDAQ, as soon as price broke this swing high over here as an objective, we have a look at what time that was at 9:45. And now it makes much more sense at 9:45. That's exactly when I took off my second partial. So at that point in time, I reduced my stop loss to break even with hopes that the trade is going to pump to the moon. But of course, we can't always be right. And this trade ended up stopping me out at my break even level pretty shortly after. But of course, you shouldn't be unhappy with a trade like this, since we still managed to pay ourselves in the process. If you imagine we took this bullish trade on the NASDAQ, you can see that yes, we would have been able to capture a decent impulsive bullish move. However, when we use relative strength analysis and you choose the strongest of the three, the bullish move that you capture will likely be much more volatile and much more greater in size. Alright, so that covers this trade over here. So now I just want to move on to another example on how to use relative strength. And this backtesting example can be a very good demonstration for that. So once again, with the RMR pattern, first we look for a raid. So under some relative equal lows. Once price breaks through, there's the raid. Next, we look for a market structure shift, breaking some swing highs, which it does. And finally, a return area. There's a gap down here. So once price retraces into that area, that's where we can buy. But once again, what haven't we done? We haven't done a relative strength analysis yet. So the same way we did with the Fibonacci last time, we can draw a fib from the bottom of the raid to the top of the market structure shift. And we know that below 50% is a discount in price, which is a fair price. And we can see that on the Dow, we have reached around 62% of a retracement level. Now let's have a look at the S&P. Here on the S&P, we draw the same fib, and we can see that price has retraced just to the 50% level, just under the 50% level. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the Dow retraced further, so the Dow was weaker at the time, and the S&P is actually a bit stronger. Alright, now let's move on to the final one, the NASDAQ. And here on the NASDAQ, we can see the same fib from the bottom of the raid to the top of the market structure shift. How deep has price retraced? And we can see that price has not even reached that 50% level. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the NASDAQ is actually the strongest of the three, not even reaching the 50%. The S&P is a little bit weaker, retracing a little bit further than the 50%. And the Dow is actually now the weakest, retracing to the 62% level. So on the first entry, we saw that the Dow was actually the strongest. But now on the second entry, the Dow is actually the weakest. So for this second trade, we actually wouldn't take a long on the Dow at 10.49. We'd actually place our entry on the NASDAQ at 10.49 right there. And if you want to see the benefits of choosing the NASDAQ using relative strength, you can see on the NASDAQ, we have a strong bullish movement breaking the New York high and traveling much further than the New York high. Whereas if we place the long on the Dow, you can see that that New York high was only broken just by a bit. So this will show you the benefits of choosing the strongest of the three when longing, but you can swap it all around. If you have a short setup and you're looking to place a short, just adding one step to your trading, a relative strength analysis, you want to make sure to place a short on the weakest of the three so you can take advantage of a larger bearish movement. Alright guys, that'll be it for this video. I'll just turn off all my annotations if you want to take a screenshot of the naked chart so you can outline the RMR yourselves for study practice. But other than that guys, I hope you learned something new. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. It makes me very happy. And if you haven't joined our community Discord, I'll leave the link in the top of the description. Once you join, head over to the rules section and hit that tick and you'll unlock the entire server. We've got an excellent community in here and we all trade in a similar fashion. You won't find much retail logic and trend lines in here. So chatting with some people could be a very powerful tool with your learning. But yeah, other than that, leave a comment if you've got any questions. But until next time, take care everyone. Peace.